And you can hear me.
Good. Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining. I'm super excited to have Chris Pearson from Jostens with us. I met with Chris through LinkedIn and his very insightful posts, and he has a sense of humor that I really enjoy, and I hope you all get a flavor of that today. Chris has an incredible level of experience as a doer, as a practitioner, which is something I so value. A lot of people we talk to are really on the other side. Like you're a vendor, you're a consultant, you're trying to sell into organizations the sort of benefits of AI. But Chris is on the other side. He works at a large organization in, on the technology side. So for him, hype versus what can actually be delivered is an incredibly important aspect. But before we get into all of that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris, let him introduce himself quickly, and then we can go over the agenda. Chris, go ahead, please.
Well, thanks for having me this morning, Saurabh. It's really great to be here. I'm excited about what we're talking about. My name is Chris Pearson. I'm based in Houston, Texas. I have been a Salesforce professional for 16 years. I'm losing track of the number of years, but I've been in the industry for a while. I've been leading enterprise development teams for now going into like my ninth or 10th year. I've spoken at a couple Dreamforces, but my passion has always been business technology. But my interests have really been about AI for these past couple years. It's been such an exciting world that I've really tried to just plunge myself into it. That's where I met you and a lot of other trailblazers across the Salesforce community and outside the community. So I've been really spending a lot of time lately on trying to practice about and implement all of these AI workflows that you're reading about.
Yes, that's great. So, for everybody's benefit, I spoke with Chris earlier, and some of the topics that I think we're going to cover today, and I really want you all to hang around and benefit from Chris's experience, is just understanding the real world challenges and considerations around bringing AI into the enterprise. Chris has been doing a lot of work with Vernon Keenan, and as part of the Keenan Vision, and they have done a study around overlay, embedded, and just general challenges around enterprise AI considerations for customers. So we'll definitely dive into that. One of the things that's really interesting to me, and I think for a lot of other folks, is that Chris has been instrumental in his organization to look at integrating and operationalizing AI across SDLC. In particular, he's done some very interesting things with JIRA, which we'll try to do a webinar pretty soon here, and then also talk about how can all of us get started with it. So that's broadly the agenda. Chris, let's start with the considerations and challenges around AI in enterprises and your experiences in that
Well, I think it starts with picking the right problems to go after. I think, and that really equates to building a foundational understanding of what this technology is. It can really seem like magic. I remember the very first time I had used it was like a chat GPT wrapper app to essentially write a very rudimentary sentence. I think I asked it about, like, I said, what do Salesforce administrators think of multi-select pick lists? And I got this wonderful like paragraph written from AI, and I was absolutely enthralled with how did it know what to say? How did it come up with something that I'd given it at the time a very poor prompt? And so what I recommend is really building an understanding of how this technology works and start to understand that it's doing really a lot of complex math underneath the hood and doing a statistical prediction or an algorithm to predict exactly what's coming next. And so starting at that foundational layer to understand truly how AI works, because then you can start to experiment with your own processes and asking it questions, giving it tasks, and starting to understand where it has its where it's really good at and where it falls short.
True, true. I would agree. And I know that as part of the Keenan Vision study, you and Vernon and some other folks have had an opportunity to dive even deeper into it. Uh, when you think about really just the incredible amount of hype around AI and what customers are able to get extract value in terms of bringing it in, dealing with user adoption, technology, governance, security, all of that. Are there any findings in particular in that area that helped you clarify the things that you thought about and looked at? And were there surprises? Were there things that added to what you've always suspected?
Yes, yeah, there is. And I can speak about that in kind of both my own experience and then where we're seeing it with other organizations. But first, let's just address the 800-pound gorilla in the room, which is the hype. The hype cycle, whether it's the stock prices of companies like Nvidia or the valuations of companies like OpenAI and Anthropic that are going through the roof, or it's the simple pace of AI, where it seems about every couple of weeks there's a new breakthrough feature, there's a new AI model, there's some new bold claim. Maybe it's even AI being able to pass a test that was previously reserved for only humans to pass, and now it's actually getting what we call kind of PhD type of intelligence. So you've got the hype cycle, and then you've got your own use of it, experimenting with it and seeing, what kind of answers can I get out of it? What kind of tasks can I give to this? And you start to realize that AI works best with data. And the more data, the more context that you can provide to AI, the higher likelihood of the results being satisfactory. And I say satisfactory, I don't say correct. That's one of the things I think is most important for AI practitioners to recognize, is that the answer that AI gives you, it's not the right answer. So whether it's looking through your support knowledge base or your sales playbook to give you that answer, it's not the right answer. It's just the statistical likeliest answer, the highest probability. And we start to learn these new vocabulary words such as non-deterministic or probabilistic as a way to describe technology that is very new to us. As someone I mentioned before, I've spent 16 years in the Salesforce ecosystem. Automation was really defined by that era by a set of very stringent conditions, and you work really hard as a business analyst, as a solution architect, to define what is that criteria and then what you expect to happen beyond that. And that's how deterministic solutions work. When it's probabilistic, you have to really think hard about what is all of the information that I need to feed into AI so that statistically it will arrive at this one particular path, action, answer, or whatever response you're looking for AI. And that's where I'm starting to see that we're starting to see a separation. You've got executives that are hearing all of this hype cycle and chase and these value propositions, and they're starting to experience this FOMO where they want AI to do they want it to accomplish and build it into their workflows and accomplish so many different tasks that oftentimes looking for it to do more than what the organization is either comfortable with, what it has the amount of data or guardrails, or just even it's their own ability to manage a digital worker performing that task. And so you need to start at a very simple process. And where we have, as a team, have started to experiment with is recognizing that providing a lot of data to AI agents in the world of software delivery, there's certain types of tasks where it doesn't need a lot of data. Like it can create very generic scaffolding or customization within these systems. We've all seen those demonstrations where it's great at designing a landing page, maybe writing some code, easily writing some HTML. But when it starts to become very specific, you really have to work to provide it a lot more data or knowledge or information. And then you also have to make sure you have the guardrails and the processes in place that kind of steer the AI so that it stays on task with that. So that's what my response to hearing kind of how businesses are struggling with is oftentimes it starts with a misunderstanding of what AI is, possibly buying into too many hype claims, and not starting small with simple or use cases that are very easy to effectively tell whether or not AI has given a correct answer or not.
True. I think it's really interesting you say this because every customer I talk to is somewhere on that continuum, right? There are organizations that have actually gone to the level that you're talking about, where they've experimented enough. They understand the deterministic versus sort of non-deterministic nuance, and they have derived an element of value. I see a lot of that happening with more on the AI automation side, with some of these multimodal log call with voice, those kind of things. And then on the other hand, you have folks who are just starting to get in. They kind of experience this initial shock of like, oh, we tried it against these 50 different things, and the answers are not consistent. We can't really use this because it doesn't follow the if then else pattern as predictably as we would like it to follow. But fortunately, I think in the last year and a half and 2 years, and I'd be curious if you're seeing this too, we seem to be kind of getting into the early majority. Like there's a lot of people, there's a lot of precedents to folks that have done this, or you typically see all these knowledge companies, these tech companies talking about Google is writing X% of their code with AI now, and so on. So there is an element of like, yes, we understand it's a technology that is starting to become mainstream, but I 100% agree with you that there is an element of still people don't quite know how to use it. It's like our early days with fire. You can probably burn out the house or cook with it. It just you need to manage it accordingly.
I agree with that. I think where you're starting to see the convergence of the intelligence get smarter. So that means it's going to know, it's going to interpret the meaning behind your words or the instructions or the data with a higher level of precision. But then you're also seeing people starting to be more comfortable working with it and recognizing that there is a full SDLC with AI, that you don't skip any steps in the traditional delivery of software. And I think we may have at the beginning kind of wanted to shortcut. We could see that it could write code, and so we wanted to immediately go have it out there and apply it. We saw that it could respond in a semi-human way, and so we wanted to put these chatbots on different sites until we started to see that we haven't really thought through all of the ways that humans can interact and all of the gotchas that go after it. Me personally, I have been a victim of my own AI poor implementations, and I've got stories in all regards. One of the earliest challenges we had was I saw how AI was so great at creating and analyzing data that I run a delivery team. I look at every month, I look at support tickets and I look at a bunch of different metrics on support tickets. I want to see which categories went up, which went down. I want to hear from my support agents and hear what are their reasons? Why are we seeing spikes or why are we seeing decreases? I compare things year over year. I compare things from a business line perspective. Who's giving me the most tickets, who's opening the most support requests, and who's not. And my idea was we should have AI start to produce this. And very quickly, we realized that this was not a lot of value in getting AI to produce the same charts and the same reports that I was getting out of my deterministic flows within JIRA support dashboards using Excel and pivot tables. Very quickly, I was like, well, why are we getting this? In fact, we would start to ask questions about the data, and it would give us completely made up answers. And so we were getting very frustrated. And that was because we realized we weren't tackling the right problems with AI. We were asking it questions that it didn't have the context to. So it was giving us made up answers, which was then frustrating us even further. And then we were spending a lot of time in trying to get it to produce the same outcomes or the same visualizations that we already had a refined process for. And I think this is a perfect example of what's going on with businesses out there is they see that they have a process that works fine, but then they're wanting to throw AI at it without a real strategy, without a real like how does it make it better? And at the end, we eventually abandoned that whole process because we weren't really going after it the right way.
So it's an interesting segue into the conversation around applying AI to SDLC and things that you've done with JIRA. I know you want to talk about the Keenan Vision study, but let's kind of cover this now, and then we can, segue into that if that's okay.
Sure.
So do you want to give us a sense of what you've done? What's your team, found useful? Are there interesting metrics?
Oh, so regarding my SDLC, sorry about that. I was thinking you had a question. So we have approached AI as our co-pilot. It is our digital assistant that I believe is our way as a team to reduce the cognitive overload that we get from working as modern knowledge workers. That means I've got competing priorities every single day of certain requests. I've got to be able to keep up with the new. I've got to be able to implement the new features, but keep an eye on technical debt. I've got environments to manage. I've got requirements, stakeholders that are communicating. All of this is just it's a whole lot, and all of these expectations are upon our team. So we've started to really apply AI throughout the SDLC in many different ways, and some are more effective than others. I'll tell you what's been effective are the throwing AI at tasks that don't always require a lot of specific enterprise knowledge. So for me, I do have to every now and then author requirements for my team. Maybe we're taking notes on a feature that needs a couple different pieces of items of work, or maybe there's something new that I want my team to explore. We've created requirements agents that will now take our inputs and then transform those into a template. And they're actually trained in a way to kind of minimize the inputs from the user so that we're now getting AI authored requirements and stories out there for our team, both from a requirements and a bugs standpoint. And what this does is it really just takes your very poorly written English words and transforms those into a more robust suite of requirements and acceptance criteria. So we started that on the requirement side. From a QA standpoint, that's my next recommendation. QA, oftentimes, if you have a really good foundation of good requirements, you don't need a lot of data to be able to come up with some helpful test cases. Every single QA team has to write positive and negative edge scenarios, sometimes performance testing or bulk testing. So we've started to create agents that help us author QA scenarios, again, to reduce the amount of time and thinking we have to come up with. I'd much rather review 10 different AI authored test cases and strike 4 of them for being invalid than have to manually think of 6 that were good. Just think about that, just from an ROI standpoint. It's like we're sometimes often holding AI to this standard that even our own humans can't meet. And if you can get 6 good test cases out of 10 and you did it in half the time or even less, just having it automatically read the requirements or the feature that was written within your case management system, then you're already achieving some value right there. So Oftentimes, from a build standpoint, yes, we've got developers that are experimenting with Agentforce vibes, that are evaluating Cursor, that are using Claude and Anthropic and ChatGPT for kind of a second pass at thinking of design for solutions. Some of these solutions have really given us good thoughts as far as just like not performing the entire task, but maybe it's just one particular design scenario that we're looking for. How should we structure this metadata in order to allow this and that and the other? What I think has been really helpful has been using it from a DevOps standpoint. And for that, I mean, we have a lot of ideas as a team. We know that there is ways to improve. We know that there are gaps in our processes and things, manual things that we have to chase after, but we don't always have the time to understand and evaluate like what are the options that we have to solve this. So one of the perfect examples was code scans. So we at this year we had implemented code scans, and I was really happy that our developers were starting to scan their code with an open source PMD Apex scanning tool. But I didn't want to stop there. I wanted this automated. I wanted this embedded in our process so that we were more accountable for the code scan results. And with AI, we used it to teach us to how do we string together, how do we kind of build the CI/CD workflows using open source tools and using our paid commercial DevOps products. Now we've got code scanning running on every new modified file. And that code scan formats things in a very nice, easy to read block, posts it right on the JIRA ticket. And so it's now being used by both our developers and our QA to essentially say, is this item truly ready for code review and QA? And because we've been able to figure out using AI to say, no, don't ignore some of the issues in the code that was there. We have a very old org and we can't fix everything. But if you're going to change code, that newly authored code, there's some standards that you want to apply to it. So that's been really helpful from a DevOps standpoint. I could keep going for the rest of the SDLC process for you, but that's just a little taste of what we're doing.
No, I think this is really interesting. I was kind of holding a bunch of questions in my head and some observations I wanted to make. I think the first one is, your comment around you have AI generate 10 cases and six of them are good, but you did it in a fraction of time is so interesting to me because I think that is one of the challenges with a lot of large enterprises, particularly that I end up talking with, is we tend to often get too dismissive about like, oh, it's not good enough. But the reality is we don't really compare it to, a human output. Like if as a human I create 10 hits, there is a possibility not all of them are at that level. I have an element of throwaway effort, which is just a natural way of thinking and doing something, right? You're gonna try a bunch of things, some work really well, some are not up to the mark, and I'm gonna go back and fix it. And I'm gonna collaborate with a bunch of people to doing it. That takes time, that takes effort, and I think that is invaluable. You have to do that. But what I love about what you're saying is by letting AI do maybe an initial run and then have somebody look at it, and if you got 6 out of 10 good ones, that's a fantastic return for $20 a month or whatever you're spending, right? It's not you're not spending in proportion to the value that you're getting out of it, assuming that element of throwaway. That's a great return of investment. If you are going to be very, you know, I think pedantic is the right word, I guess. If you're going to be like, no, I want it 100% like this, it has to be surgically precision. This thing is not there. It will never be there because it is non-deterministic by nature. So I really love your point on, kind of realizing what it, take it for what it's worth. And that is still a lot of worth that you're getting.
I wonder if some of that attitude, that work that you're picking up on, that you're getting it from our peers in the technology space, and we're kind of so much deep in the forest that we can't see the trees. Like for example, I have an integration developer on my team. And every single day, there are integration failures. In fact, I would say we probably spend 80% of our time chasing 20% of the data exceptions. So like that in and of itself, sort of like, it's like, oh, there's always integration problems. Actually, there's not always integration problems. We just talk and focus on the problems because that's where a human needs to get involved in the process. But 90% of the time, those integrations are working perfectly. So maybe I wonder if it's just a little bit of perspective there.
I think so too. I think so too. And I think again, it's going back to that mindset of we've always lived in a deterministic world, right? A vast majority of the way technology, languages, the kind of typecasting works is it's pretty deterministic of what you're doing. I may misinterpret and write code poorly, but if I write it well, it will always perform pretty much exactly the way it was intended to. And now we are not moving into a world where it doesn't happen that way anymore. And I think it's that transition that needs us to understand that it's a different kind of beast, and then harness its value accordingly. So I thought that was very interesting to hear about. The other thing that as you were talking about, doing sort of code scans and automating a part of it. It's interesting to me. We are, by the way, going through an exact same effort internally. So, it'll definitely be good for us to at some point compare notes and see how you approached it and how our engineers are looking at it. But I love that whole aspect of automating so much of it. The sort of analogy that I draw is with anti-lock brakes, right? Like the ABS braking system. Basically, the idea there is in locomotives and in trains, by default, they're always brakes are on. They're always locked. You cannot move this thing. The only time to move it is to sort of, kind of release the brakes and then it moves. If you stop or if you do something else, the brakes just come back on. So that there is never a failure of brakes. The default position is off. In a lot of ways, I think of automated code scans like that. Like that is our default, status, right? We will never ever not have those going forward in the future. And then we may look at the results and say, yeah, that's fine. To your earlier point, like it's good enough for now. We have a whole bunch of other things in the grand scheme of priorities. This thing is not that important. It's a bug, we log it as a bug, we move forward. But the fact that I can automate so much of this and apply for the first time in our history, something that can look at unstructured data and kind of highlight and pick up on patterns. And now, as new models come out, you're starting to look at something that has a significant level of proficiency, which will continue to improve in the next 18 to 36 months. I think we'll see, better and better things with, the Gemini 3 and whatever else OpenAI and others are cooking. I think that's a really interesting aspect. So maybe switching gears a little bit, can you talk a little bit about the study at Keenan Vision and what have you guys found?
Yeah, well, we were very interested in talking with people about these that were talking the same subject matter with other organizations. How are you looking at AI? How are you deciding what platform or what product that you're going with? How do you decide which use case you are? How do you go from testing things to production? And then what are the things that you learn when you're doing that? So it's really we've been looking at kind of the entire SDLC of AI from all the way from planning all the way through the delivery and the continuous operations that happen from there. And we're finding that that a lot of the same themes that we've talked about are prevalent in the marketplace. We spoke with 48 different movers and shakers across the industry, Salesforce consultants, ISVs, executives, leading AI consultants that are actually talking to other organizations about AI, completely agnostic of a platform altogether. and hearing from them what do they say. And we started to really pick up on a lot of different themes that are captured within the paper. There's many different factors that influence what use case, what platform you go after. And some examples are it determines your data standpoint, your data posture, like what's the source of data that's going to be used for the AI task. Can that task be clearly articulated by the humans who are actually performing it? That's a big one. Because if they can't actually state what is going to happen, then it's going to be really hard to tell an AI agent what to do. And it's going to be even harder to evaluate if they got it correct or not. So then there's an entire library about anticipating the pricing of this software, which requires a very different mindset. It's a consumption-based license. It's not just you're buying seats, but it is like how much you're using, how much data you're uploading to AI, and then in turn, how much data or tokens are being processed on the output. And is that happening in real time? Is that a bunch of batch jobs that are occurring on a daily basis? There's all sorts of things to consider in that regard.
That's really interesting. Were there specific findings out of which you expected and some that really surprised you?
Some that surprised us were the executive fear of missing out. That we did hear there were examples of projects where executives were essentially throwing themselves at the mercy of their implementation consultants. You need to get an AI project because I promised the board this for Q2 or for Q3 or whatever. And to me, that really is very concerning from an industry standpoint. You think of there's plenty of people out there that will take your money. And so if your needs of an organization are not aligned with the organization that you have contracted with to achieve those goals, and you could argue that some of these implementation consultants are all about the hours, the length of the project, the number of man hours or man days that are going with that versus the true outcomes. Then that can lead to projects that don't pay off an ROI or don't ever make it into production because of the low value. So I found that to be a little bit surprising, just because you hear so much about AI and the certain use cases that it's really fit for. And then there's also vendor claims, and so that was not surprising to hear that everybody's vendor or all of these vendors out there argue that their agents or their assistants don't hallucinate. That was a very funny one because it's almost impossible to say that you don't. It's just like a nature of the beast. They will hallucinate given the right set of questions or the right set of inputs. I think you also had executives really wanting to go for broke and strive for some very complex use cases. That FOMO is driving the selection of what I call like really complicated AI work. And sometimes the best is the low grunt work. Like can it perform these tasks that a human does have to spend? Maybe they're just spending a couple minutes on it per day, but it's a repetitive task and you can start to build on that. So those are a couple examples. I talked about data, where that data exists that's necessary to provide the right context to AI. In any given corporate shop, you may have multiple knowledge stores. I have to deal with this right now, Saurabh. We're a Teams shop, so I've got lots of Teams sites and Teams documents and channels that I've maintained for years. But we also run our delivery process with JIRA, and we also run our support process out of JIRA Service Management. So that means I also have knowledge and data in JIRA. And so I've already creating these kind of silos of information out there that one don't just natively speak to each other without some connection. But then you're starting to figure out like, well, what's the source? What should I point AI at to consult and give me that knowledge? Is it everything that the development team has been working on? Or is it all of this knowledge that we've also shared and created for our own sanity? You know, it's a very complicated problem.
That's an interesting set of observations. I do agree with you that that whole executive level pressure to deliver something because they've promised. Uh, I kind of also think it's, we tend to think it's fear of missing out, but it's really market pressure, right? Like their board is the one saying, hey, you're going to fall behind, and there's this, your competitors are doing these things. And I think there is an element of truth in there, right? Like it is going back to that whole idea of how do you constantly push your enterprise IQ up, right? How do you make sure your internal organization, the change management, the user adoption, right, is going to happen as we slowly, gradually, bring these things in. And there is a cost of doing business. You will make, mistakes, projects will fail. Those kind of things will happen. You can minimize them, be prudent and pragmatic about it, but the bottom line is it's the nature of doing something. Like I think failure is a it's a given, and that's not a bad thing. I also thought it was very interesting when you said go for go for broke. I think that's a very interesting word you use there. um, did you find any actually, I should clarify, was this study predominantly for Salesforce customers, or did you also speak with organizations that did not have Salesforce at all?
We spoke with industry outside the industry. So we spoke to AI consultants who are platform agnostic, who are simply advising some of the greatest and largest organizations. We also spoke to kind of what I call like tangential platforms. We spoke to some Atlassian expertise, both from a channel perspective as well as internal leaders that had influence on their own AI strategy. And so, but we realized that this also gave us a certain view that we realize has some limitations, and so we are wanting to expand the amount of data that we gathered and speak to more customers, cover more platforms, and give a more rounded assessment of AI based upon where we finished this year with this initial phase of the project.
Okay. And were there something interesting specific to Salesforce customers and implementing AI within Salesforce?
Yeah. I talked. So the data side is not to be underestimated. The data gravity is the term that we're using, and that essentially points out to say, where the data that is necessary for these agentic processes, does that exist in CRM? If not, how accessible is it? Where is it? There's a lot of different questions. Is that ERP data? Is that external knowledge? And so that can really define whether or not the project is going to take a much longer implementation or is going to be more of a straightforward, what I call like a plain vanilla implementation. You've got Salesforce knowledge, you're wanting to do a support process, and your organization maintains all of your operating procedures on a monthly cadence. So that means that's kind of a way of saying this is a cookie cutter AI implementation. All my data exists within CRM, and you've already got robust processes to curate and maintain some of the additional data. But that doesn't happen with every single organization. There's another aspect that influences the success of these AI projects, and we're calling that activation energy. And we for that we really say like, what is all of that energy that you have to summon in order for this project to move forward. So that can mean how many different departments do I have to liaise with? It's a given that you're almost always going to need to interface with a legal department anytime you're starting to use AI. So they're going to be really concerned about what is the scope, what is the liability, was there any copyright or anything like that where you could be accused of reusing someone else's content. So there's a litany of list of items to look for from an activation energy standpoint. You've got the legal side, you've got the other cross-functional teams. So at Jostens, I run the CRM delivery, but I don't run business intelligence. I don't run custom apps or data science. But if I need those inputs from those other groups, either from their data stores or just their subject matter expertise, then that means I need more support from a leadership perspective. I need someone well above me saying, please, you need to give Chris all of the help and support you can for this project. And so what we're saying is like these AI projects, in order for them to be successful, they do take a high level of engaged executive activation energy.
Very, very interesting points, and I love the terminology. I had Vernon earlier on one of these, and he also used that term, data gravity. One of the other areas that I know that your study includes is the embedded versus overlay type applications and sort of the options that customers have. Can you talk maybe a little bit about it and just share what you found interesting?
Yeah, I think where my simple analogy for some of these AI terms, because I feel like we've got to define what these mean. Um, Most people have a smartphone, right? I've got my phone right here. And this phone comes with some out of the box, it comes with a mail app, a messages app, a calculator, and all of that. And it kind of does some things natively that are just built within the device or the operating system of the device. The information doesn't ever have to leave or go anywhere else. And that is kind of what we'd call embedded AI. It's in whatever product or platform that you are using. The AI is baked right into that. So in the world of CRM, it would be Agentforce. That's the most native AI capability that exists. But why do people have apps on our phone? I use this analogy of like long ago, we actually used to, before we had Uber, we would pull up the phone app and we would have to call a taxi, right? And say, I'm right here, come pick me up and wait. And you never know when they're going to be there. And you don't know if they're going to take cash or card and all of that. But the reason why we chose Uber, or the reason why Uber is a thing, is because it extends the functionality of the phone and does something that calling a taxi is not efficient. That actually goes out there and finds your ride, and we know how Uber works, right? So the reason why we add apps to our phone is to either shortcut processes, do things that the phone out of the box can't do, or do them in a better, more efficient way. And that's where we say these overlay apps also exist. Sometimes they need to connect to multiple different data stores, like a company called Glean, and simply index all of your corporate knowledge across, like what I was talking about earlier with JIRA and Microsoft Teams and SharePoint and whatever other data store that I may have. Other times they're simply built in a much more efficient time to market value. They're dead simple. Like the reason why some of these apps on the phone are so successful is because the learning curve is so easy. The apps like GPTify, right? They're so easy to learn and deploy within your CRM that's a reason why you are offering your product for free out there, is because you're putting your money behind the fact that this product is the fastest, most easiest way to connect your org to AI. And I think you've got a really good, compelling argument there with your product. And you've just started to think of all of the other things that organizations need besides just sending data outside to AI and getting a response back. And so these overlay apps, are very promising. They're very competitive, and sometimes they can outmaneuver these embedded platforms.
Thank you. I appreciate the kind word, and I agree. I think I love your analogy of the native apps on a smartphone versus the Apple Music versus Spotify, right? Kind of that differentiation. Are there specific challenges, Chris, that you heard about, like just implementing AI within Salesforce? More from a Salesforce from a technology standpoint, like sure you need the foundation for data and you have to go through governance and change management. Are there other areas and are there tips that you can share with everybody who's listening in terms of really how can they get started?
I think yes. So challenges with AI implementations in Salesforce. And I think this, I don't know if this is really specific to these implementations, but it's going to be like identifying the right use cases, identifying the necessary data to support those use cases, getting the actual business process, the future state in a way that's well defined so that an agent can actually follow those instructions, which sounds simple. It's not simply a matter of writing a good prompt. It's really thinking through a lot of those different scenarios. And then finally, the monitoring and testing of that. And that's going to involve using AI to simulate different potential transactions or possibly just having humans internally grade the response and realize that it is a full SDLC circular diagram process, meaning that there is no end. You are constantly iterating on these to keep up with these AI models because the models are improving. There's going to be new variations that are happening out in the wild, and then you've also just got the threats that you also have to prevent for. So there's a fair amount of stuff to be concerned about out there. But don't let that stop you from getting started. And there are simple places where you can start, which can be items like Agent Force Vibes. I really do. I really am excited about that product from a Salesforce standpoint, and I'll tell you why. Because they're getting it in the hands of more users, so it's not so behind any um, difficult paywalls. It doesn't use your data cloud credits, so that argument is out of the question. It's also using some of the world's smartest models, such as GPT-5, and they're giving you what I'd say is a fairly generous free tier offering of 50 requests. So you don't need to start by having AI author code. I wouldn't recommend that to anybody is to start having it write anything. That's a recipe for disaster. Can you start with having it design some of the new features that you're looking for? Or analyze some of the technical debt that you have. Like I think there's a huge opportunity out there for that use case. And if that doesn't excite you, then I would simply say get your credit card out for one of these consumer grade tools. ChatGPT is the leading provider of AI consumer tools with like 800 million users. There's a reason why 800 million users are using it on a monthly basis because it is so easy to use. They offer the most features and the most customization, and you're frankly just it's a great way to get your hands on these tools. So there's kind of like that's a you can use the free or the paid version. I would highly encourage people to explore the paid versions because of the additional privacy controls that you have in place.
I would agree. I think it's I talk to a lot of folks and sometimes I hear this, oh, we are not trained. We are, our company wants us to do this, but I don't have these access to these softwares. And in this day and age, that argument is so hollow, right? Like you can spend literally a little bit of time with free tools, or for $20 a month, you can actually play with some of the world's leading technologies and just slowly, gradually build familiarity with them and just do very, very simple things. Your term around like the grunt work, like eliminate some of your grunt work where possible. It doesn't have to be work related if you have restrictions on what you can and cannot use at work. But just to kind of understand and appreciate enough of what this tool does, what does Gen AI really mean? How can I understand it and bring it into my organization? Because one of the advantages that I've always felt when I was in internal IT, I thought that there's nobody else in the world who understands our problem as well as we do. But we are so much in love with that problem that we want to revel in complaining about it and not so much focus on solving it. But people like you are sort of the torch bearers that are driving this change forward. I think that real change in organizations will come from those internal champions, those change makers, folks like you, who understand that you don't need to spend millions of dollars. You don't need like to send people out on some week-long training. We can all start with some tiny little things here or there, and slowly and gradually, chip away the things where it's okay to use AI. And then eventually, as the organization builds enough awareness, confidence, and is more comfortable around it, then you can go even larger when you need to. But the key is to get started so that you're giving yourself enough of a gestation period, if you will, so that you're bringing everybody on the ride with you versus just one person going out with all this magic and everyone else is going, I don't know what to do. Do you see that as part of your journey of bringing people on with you and starting small?
I love that because I think it just equates to finding the right tasks that you are comfortable with. And that doesn't, so you need to start where you're comfortable. You don't need to start the most complex tasks, but everyone has those repetitive things that kind of have to occur in their job or in their personal life on a certain schedule. And so it's a matter of just mapping those and figuring out like, okay, how much, like, what happens if AI gets this wrong? But I can tell you for certain, if you do not manage the process, and if you simply throw AI at all of your problems and don't check on it, then you will experience breaks in every single aspect. And I'm totally guilty of it. I've had AI author code that we didn't check, and it truncated a large Apex class and completely broke a UAT cycle for half a day because we outsourced it to AI, but weren't really checking its results. We were simply saying that's great. I've had AI author test cases and create test cases that would assert functionality that we would never do. It was almost like AI was treating us like we were like the National Security Administration, like we were running like a CIA operative and needed to securely validate things when that wasn't the standard for our delivery team. So it created a bunch of scenarios that were like, no, that's not it. It's authored design documents and requirements for functionality that no one has asked for. And that's been really fun when that's assigned to a developer and they're asking me during stand up, are you sure you want another custom logging utility to be created with a whole separate object that's going to detail when this one bulk process fails? It was kind of this like, oh, that's a whole lot of work that no, we don't need to do that. But again, we let AI go unchecked on in all these different fronts, and so we would experience breaks in all of our processes. So it really is a matter of finding the right tasks, but then what is the constant learning and observation and monitoring that you're going to have behind that? And that's the only way that you're going to be able to continue to have it work for you is if you have all of those if you have all those processes outlined.
That is so well said, Chris. I really love how you kind of pulled it all together in terms of being very real and also very pragmatic. I wish we see more such stories, use cases, and leaders like you who have their nose to the grindstone. One of the challenges I find is you're talking to people who are either overly pessimistic or overly optimistic. And I also think that the sooner someone starts with AI and however little they do, the better off they are, because then you make a few mistakes, but you're not quote unquote burning the house down, right? Like you've understood enough. You've tried a few things. It's just a new disruptive technology, and now that you're at a point where you have a really good sense of what works and what doesn't, and I hope it was as valuable to folks, tuning in as it was to me. Uh, Thank you for your time today. I so
Yeah,
enjoyed it.
yeah. No, I appreciate it. The last piece of advice I
Please.
leave with with leaders out there is if you're not talking about AI and encouraging it with your team, chances are there's somebody out there, either like within your team, department, or organization that is, but they're afraid to bring that up. And there's I think there's starting to be this stigma where it's like you're using AI to do something, but you're not talking about that. And I think that's a really dangerous spot because you're missing the opportunity to share your learnings. So the number one thing that I do is building the excitement around AI is when I see my staff and my team and hear about them experimenting with that, I'm encouraging. I immediately say I want to set up time. I want to dedicate time to support you. I want to hear about this. I want to see this and give them their input, and that starts to create this fire within your organization where it starts to spread. And I think that that's really important because I also see headlines out there. I saw this one that I'll leave you with, Sarah, but it was a headline in the Wall Street Journal. And it said, the reward for using AI at work is more work. And I think that that's really terrifying out there for people, and it's intimidating, it's disappointing, but I don't think that that's the right way of approaching AI in the organization. You are going to find that there are so many possibilities out there. The more that you get your hands on it and your team to experiment with it and share their learnings and start to collaborate more, the use cases and the ideas are they're going to be falling from the sky.
True, true. Very, very well put, my friend. I'm so glad we got a chance to catch up on this, Chris. Thank you. I so enjoyed it. We should definitely do something like this again.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Have a great day. Thanks, everyone. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye.